Hi, it's Ray Grant. It's Wednesday, November 29th, 2023. It is 10:38 p.m. here in Pittsburgh. I decided to, after the dealing with the hostility in our last episode, I decided to wear my favorite album of all time is Love Forever Changes. So I decided to wear my love shirt for this session. Um, Also, after watching my last video, I decided to wear a cap to cut down on the glare from the top of my head. I thought I had more hair than that, but apparently, you learn things when you look at your own videos. So, um, anyway, I'm going to answer a few questions first on this episode, and then then I'm going to have to take a drink already. Then I'm going to deal with the general idea behind the zodiac letters. Okay, first of all, let me see if I can. I'm going to. Well, I think I'll just deal with. I'll deal with the most. Let me see. Oh, okay. 2020. Okay, I had Mr. JSV 650 ask me. He said, Ray, one thing you had mentioned, which I found interesting, was the 223. So during the Vietnam War, the U.S. military was using the M16 rifle or XM15. So those rifles shoot both 223 and 5.56 NATO, whatever that is. The military would have been using the 5.56, whereas the civilian model would generally use the 223. I wonder if there is any reference to 5.56. Anyway, probably not useful information, but thought I would let you know. If you have any questions regarding firearms, I would be glad to help. I've been reloading ammunition and target shooting for over 20 years. And my response, I said, thanks for the information, which is useful and reminded me of something that was in my original 1990 book. I will probably address it in my next video, and this is the next video. So basically, let me think here. Okay, we'll do it. We'll do it like this, and we'll see if this works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. I can never get this thing uncapped, we can get going here. I pointed out in one of my videos that the gun sequence in the Zodiac case is actually this. It's 22 Lake Herman Road, 9mm to Blue Rock Springs Park, 45 at Lake Berryessa, 38 in Presidio Heights. And I pointed out that this is actually a code. And what it spells out using a backward alphabet, in other words, an alphabet, you would think that an alphabet that starts with Z would be the most appropriate one for the Zodiac Killers. So if you use the in ordinary alphabet numbers, this would be VISL. If you assume a repeating sequence where, for example, at 26 would be Z, 27 would be A, 28 would be B, and so forth. If you're using the backward alphabet, then it's Z equals 1, Y equals 2, X equals 3, W equals 4, and so forth. So by the time when you get to 26, that's A. When you get to 27, that's Z again. 28 is Y, 29 is X, 30 is W, and so forth. Okay, so going by that backward alphabet, what you would create is this letter sequence. It's ERHO, which is Michael O'Hare's surname spelled backward with the central A removed. And the central A is removed so that what you have is, in a regular alphabet, you have this sequence: 5, 18, 8, 15. And as you can see, what this gives you is two 23s. 5 plus 18 is 23. 8 plus 15 is 23. So the next question is, and remember, these are essentially the canonical events. It's what were planned by the Zodiacs to be the 4 public events: Lake Ermine Road, Blue Rock Springs Park, Lake Berryessa, and Presidio Heights. Essentially the 4 demonstration events, if you want to look at it that way. Okay, so you would then have that sequence. Of course, the final event in the Zodiac project would be the Terminus event, and the Terminus event would use 223 ammunition. Let me see if okay. So it would use 223 ammunition, and the question is, what would this convert to? Well, it would convert to one of the guns that uses 223 ammunition is the M14. And the only thing that the M does, like an M16, for example, the M just means model. Model 14, model 16. So this is a 22, this is a 9, this is a 45, this is a 38. It would be reasonable to call this rifle, and he would probably use, I understand, I'm not a gun expert, I understand he would probably use a Mini Ruger model 14. This is just a 14. And so that, coincidentally, in the backward alphabet, that would convert to the letter M. So what you would get effectively is this backward sequence, ERHO. In other words, O'Hare spelled backwards with, if you want to put a period there, and an M. So these are the public events in the Bay Area, and this is the event in Greater Boston, and this is like the expanse of the country in between, if you want to look at it that way. But it's that sequence: ERHO followed by M. Okay, and again, coincidentally, if you look at pi and binary, it looks like this. If you convert pi to binary, it looks like this. And then convert it to digital binary, which in the case of the Zodiacs is 1 for dash and 0 for dot. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you're converting. Well, you're converting binary to Morse, and you're converting the binary number one to dash, and the binary dot, and the binary zero to dot. So what you get is you get this sequence. Okay, that's pi. That's pi through the, if you want to call that like the binary dot, um, uh, for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 digits, 13 decimal digits, binary digits. And this converts in Morse to binary to the following sequence. It's E. No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. It's M E R A H O. So it's Michael O'Hare, basically, with the O'Hare backwards. Now this is a colossal coincidence that binary pi converts through a consistent system. As Dave Aranchek talks about using using the same conversion operation to get a result. You don't change the operation, you just maintain, and all they're doing here is using binary pi through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Is it 12? 2, 3, 6, 9. I guess it's 12. No, it's 13. Okay. Through the whole number, which is 3, and then the binary fraction through 13 places, and it's followed, for example, by 949, which is the beginning of the zip code of San Rafael, but it would be on the West Coast anyway. My pi and binary converts using a system of conversion, and remember, all AZ decrypt. All that program does is convert symbols to letters in the hopes of creating a possible plain text in English, okay? And essentially that's what we're doing here. It's the same idea, okay? So it's 1 for dash and 0 for dot. And what you get is, in Morse code, MERAHO, okay? So pi converts to Michael O'Hare with his last name backwards. And the gun sequence in the 4 canonical events converts to Michael O'Hare's last name backwards, with the A taken out so that you create 2 23s. And then one rifle that uses 223 ammo is a Mini Ruger, an M14, Model 14. 14 in the same backward alphabets converts to M. Okay, so it's well, I won't say it's the same idea, but it's a similar idea. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at here is that's what the idea was. And if you're asking me what rifle were they going to use for the sniper event from the rooftop of the Liberty Mutual, I would say an M14. Although I think a standard M14 would have been very unwieldy, and an M16 was an M16 supposedly was just a much better rifle. But I think there are relatively modern versions of the M14. I think the Mini Ruger 14, something like that. Um, there are people like Mr. JSV 630 who can speak on, and Scott Bullock, obviously. Let me see if I can get there again. Mr. JSV 650 obviously know infinitely more about firearms than I do. I'm just looking at the numbers and saying, okay, this number appears to lead to this sequence and so forth. But to answer his question in the most roundabout way possible, this is what the gun sequence was in the Bay Area. This is what the idea was, to create 223s. I believe what his intent was to use, let's say, a Mini Ruger 14 from the Liberty Mutual rooftop, and what that would do is it would create an M in that gun sequence. So it would be M, or in this case, I guess, working backwards in time, OHRE instead of ERAHO, but pi goes MERAHO. Just using that sequence, and again, Dave Aranchik is welcome to put out a video or contact me and debunk my thinking on all of this, but I think that's correct because it's a consistent operation. So I hope that answers the question. Let's go to the I think it's my previous video here, and probably is almost identical. Okay, well, I guess two questions. This is Andrew WVA. Okay, who's I think is a friend of Ned's. Said this a day ago. He says, Ray, you stated the Terminus event was scheduled for August 11th, 1989, which was on a Friday. I'm curious if you had any knowledge of Michael O'Hare's whereabouts on that day. Was he in town on vacation doing work on campus? From your ebook, it sounds like campus security was wondering about your, Ray Grant's, exact location when your coworker was talking to them on the phone. Well, I believe what the authorities in Boston were trying to do was to make absolutely sure that I wasn't anywhere in Boston so that I might suddenly jump out, in the midst of the festivities on that Friday, and just to assure themselves that I was back in Pittsburgh, and not my coworker, my supervisor, actually, on that day, and I have just lost everything here. Let's see if okay. Anya was talking to him on the phone. Those people are called delivery supervisors in the U.S. Postal Service. Anyway, on another note, it was great seeing the Steelers finally surpassing 400 yards on offense in a game. Yeah, I'd like to see them score more than 13 points, though. Of course, that touchdown was good, and it was disallowed, but the final score of that game should have been 23-10, not 16-10, but that has nothing to do with this video series. So, okay, let's go back and okay, so you asked me, do I have any knowledge of the whereabouts of Michael O'Hare? No. They didn't, the authorities in Greater Boston did not tell me what they were doing. And to this date, haven't told me what they were doing. Harvard never said anything about me after I mailed all my books to the school and so forth. The only authorities in Boston who ever contacted me in the wake of something I did was the Brookline Police back in 1981. what did I say? 1981? I meant 1991. In the wake of my mailing to Michael O'Hare's neighbors in Brookline, with all of his neighbors within a 3-block radius, received my Brookline pamphlet, which I don't have a copy of at the moment, but it was called The Zodiac Killer Lives in Brookline. Okay, and it was mailed to everybody who lived within a 3-block radius of 12 Abbotsford Road. And that was mailed, if I'm not mistaken, it was mailed in August of 1991. And of course, by that, I didn't realize this, and I didn't realize it until the following year, but Michael O'Hare had already moved out of his house. So it was kind of a futile effort on my part. But apparently, the Brookline police were contacted by several of those neighbors of 12 Abbotsford Road, of the house that had been absconded from. And because I think O'Hare moved out, I want to say maybe June or July of that year. And then my pamphlet landed on Brookline in August, but he was already gone. It was essentially the same information that was in my book that was sent to Harvard, but it was just a pamphlet. It was like 24, it was like 8 sheets turned into a 24-page pamphlet where I basically outlined the general ideas of why I believed Michael O'Hare to be the Zodiac Killer. Anyway, so yeah, the only police agency or authorities who ever contacted me were the Brookline police. And they called me up because I had included my phone. Anyone could call me. And they called me up that night, the night that the mailings landed. And they said, could you explain what you're doing here? And I said, yes, I believe this guy's a Zodiac Killer. And I'm just notifying his neighbors of who he is. And I explained the legal situation and everything. And the Brookline police said, well, we're just contacting you because the neighbors called us and asked why this was being sent to them. And I said, well, I'm sure it sounds pretty kooky. And the Brookline police were very nice. They said, no, we found this to be very serious. And you know, I don't know if they said it was convincing, but they said we found this material to be very serious in nature, and we didn't take it to be, I hate to use this term, crazy, you know. They basically said, yeah, I mean, this seems like a serious matter. But as I said, what moots that whole thing is that Michael O'Hare had already moved to Berkeley. I didn't find that out till the following year. And the only reason I actually found it out, and the only reason I eventually found out that Michael O'Hare was at Cal Berkeley, was that I had a coal directory. I didn't realize how coal directories are used, that they are actually, you kind of, I don't even know that this is still true, but the coal business directories, you got through a business subscription. And the idea was you paid them some ridiculous amount of money, hundreds of dollars, and then they sent you a copy of their business directory for wherever, for Greater Boston, let's say, and it told you who lived at each address, you know, to the extent that that information was available. As a result of which, I could then address all of my pamphlets and, you know, send them to the people involved. And so the following year, the coal directory contacted me and said, we're waiting for you to pay for your subscription. And I said, well, I assumed I was just buying a directory from you for like a one-time use only, and that's the only reason I got it. I already did the one-time use for it. And they got very pissed off, you know, because they said I was not dealing with my vendors very very well, that I was, at the very least, I should have mailed the book back. And I said, I said, well, do you want me to mail you back and they had sent me like a new book and a new copy of the Cold Directory. And I said, I will be more than happy to mail you back the two books. However, I'm not paying you another year's subscription. Yeah, I mean, it's several $100s to subscribe to those things, or at least it was back then, back in the early 1990s. Close to, I don't think it quite hit 4 digits, but it's close to 4 digits. And I didn't want to have to pay that amount for a directory I wasn't even going to use. So I just said, well, I will be happy to mail you your directory back. So they said, well, we'll send you, the carton that you can mail because it's like a gigantic, it's like a hardcover phone book basically. So I mailed the book that I had back, and they sent me the carton for the new book that I forget which I mailed first, but anyway, in the process of doing that, just out of curiosity, I opened up to the new directory and looked up 12 Abbotsford Road, and sure enough, Michael O'Hare was no longer living there. And that came as a surprise to me. He was listed I believe he was listed in the 91 directory and not in the 92, something like that. And that began my quest to figure out where he had gone, because as I said, Harvard never contacted me, so I didn't even know that he had left the school necessarily. So anyway. It was just kind of like a fluke that I found out that he had gone to. I think I then contacted the U.S. Postal Service, and you can get somebody's forwarding address for a fee, and that's what I did. And I found out that he lived in Berkeley Heights now, and somehow I found out that he was lecturing at the Goldman School. Which is like, well, to be clear, I think I said in the previous video, in a couple of the previous videos, that was a lateral move. It wasn't. It was a move down because there were 90 faculty at the JFK School at Harvard. There were only 16 faculty members at the Goldman School in 1991. It was a dinky little school, a public policy school at the time, certainly compared to the JFK school. The only argument that you could make is if you said, well, Michael O'Hare was trying to, create his own career path, and he was more likely to do that at a smaller school than if he had stayed at the JFK school at Harvard. Maybe, but I mean, remember, Michael O'Hare had those options open to him he was what was it? He was 47 at the time that he made his move. He was at MIT in the 1970s. Okay. I mean, he was on the faculty at MIT. He was at least an assistant professor. I think he may have been an associate professor at MIT. So if he was worried about his career path, the options that he chose seem a little bit strange. Okay, but again, I will leave. I'm besides not being an expert on guns, I'm also not an expert on academic ladders, where people are placed on, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. But I had, of course, an anonymous poster on YouTube years ago come out and say, well, it makes more sense for Michael O'Hare to go to Cal Berkeley. First of all, the weather's better. Well, if he was worried about the weather, would he have a house in Vermont? Okay. So whatever it was, a summer house in Vermont. That that's not logical to me. But I mean, if he was scared about cold weather, and the Bay Area is very developed. I mean, by comparison. And she said, and the Goldman School's #1. Yeah, well, whenever that post was filed, I don't know, 2015, 2016. By that time, 25 years later, the Goldman School was ranked #1 by U.S. News and World Report. I still think the JFK School is probably, certainly a higher profile public policy school than the Goldman School is. But the Goldman School was, as I said, was a dinky little place back in 1991 when O'Hare transferred to it. So, but the short answer is I have no idea whether they were checking out on where O'Hare was, or who knows. All we know is that he didn't show up at either the MIT Tower or the Liberty Mutual building that Friday. And I've already explained why I believe that he didn't. Okay, next question. Let's see. Oh, the next question is from Irish Brummy 01. I said Irish Brummy 02 for some reason in one of my videos. Thank you for answering my question in your video. It's much appreciated. What I don't understand, however, is something else you said. Maybe I'm misunderstanding or picking it up wrong, but you said the Z340 and Z408 were drawn up at the same time. The thing is, the 408 was sent on July 31st, 1969, and the 340 wasn't sent until November 8th, 1969. So how could the Zodiac have known on July 31 that there was going to be a TV show featuring the Zodiac on November 8th? Well, the TV show itself would have been something that they actually planned for. Remember, I said that they made the phone call on October 22nd because that was the date of the Adventist, supposedly what turned into the Great Disappointment, but was supposed to be the Second Coming in 1844. So the timing of the phone call to the Oakland Police Department was in their plans probably from the very beginning. And they attacked, I believe they attacked 2 Seventh-day Adventist victims, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, in September to make that point. They were attacking 2 Seventh-day Adventists, and Renee Mogelin, who was the medical examiner in Riverside, was also a Seventh-day Adventist, to make the connection between the Adventists, the Great Disappointment, what followed from the Great Disappointment was the Seventh-day Adventist. And one of the founders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was Joseph Bates. And the name Joseph Bates is inside the name Sherry Josephine Bates. And obviously is also inside the name of her father, Joseph Bates. Okay? So that was the reason that Sherry Bates was picked as a victim. Now, as I'm going to get to this idea of secondary victim of optional victims, I believe Sherry Bates was one of possibly several victims, and they chose her because of availability. Okay, so the idea is, you see this, for example, in theater. There are these theater events where you go in and you watch Act 1 of a play, and then the audience is quizzed by one of the actors, usually by the lead actor in the play, and where they think that the play is going to go. It's like a mystery play, okay? And then depending on how the audience votes, that's the way the play goes, okay? In other words, the play is set up to have various options, various plots. It can go this way. This guy can be the killer, or this other guy can be the killer, or this woman can end up being the killer, depending on what the audience says it wants, or depending on what the conversation is at intermission. Okay, so it's basically the same idea, which is the Zodiac Killers. The whole idea behind sending the Mikado letter, I've got a little list. I've got a little list of society offenders who won't be missed. Okay, and that's the idea of the Zodiacs. They had multiple people for each possible episode, and I'm assuming that the episodes themselves were possible, or they would do an episode and something would go wrong, so they wouldn't claim that murder, or they wouldn't claim. I say in Riverside that if the Zodiacs were not able to check books out on Sherry Bates's ID, Sherry Bates would never have been killed, because everything depended on placing her in the library. And somebody may come back and say, well, why were they so fixated on doing that? That seems like extraneous. Well, let's see. She was murdered in 1966, and today it's 2023. And the only person who believes that she was never in the library that night is me. Okay? Everybody else is convinced by the fact that books were taken out on her student ID. Okay? And that doesn't prove anything. I can take a gun and stick it to your head and say, give me your library card. Get the library card, walk into a library and charge books out on your card. It doesn't, that books are charged out on somebody's card or student ID doesn't mean necessarily that that person charged them out, okay? And I put it to you that all the other evidence says that Sherry Bates was not the person who charged those books out. At least, most prominent of all is that nobody who was in the library that night remembers seeing her. Okay, but how many times can I say that? But anyway, I don't know if, darn it. Okay. Let's see. So how could this, okay. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how I got off on the tangent of Rivers. Well, I started talking about Riverside. But anyway, Irish Rummy saying, how could the Zodiac have known on July 31st there was going to be a TV show? Oh, because the whole thing was set up. The idea of the phone call on October 22nd, that was set up. So in other words, they knew that that the caller was going to ask for a TV show, the Channel 7 show, and that they were going to ask for F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belli, and they got Melvin Belli, okay? So they knew all of that. What they didn't know, the original intent was to have them set the TV show up and then have nobody call, so that it mirrored the Great Disappointment. In other words, the Adventists in 1844, on October 22nd, were expecting the second coming of Jesus. And Jesus didn't show up, okay? So playing that out on October 22nd, 1969, the Zodiacs asked for the Channel 7 show to wait for the Zodiac to call in, and then the Zodiac would not call in, okay? Unfortunately, there was this jerk by the name of Eric Weil, who was, I think he disrupted a Bob Dylan news conference at some point earlier in his career. And he was in a mental hospital at the time, and he called in, and he was an effing jerk, okay? And that's what you hear on the, and nobody, I think very few people believe that was the Zodiac. However, by calling in, he destroyed the effect that they were trying to create, which was of dead silence, basically, of people waiting for a phone call that never came. That was what the idea was, okay? And what it says in Dave's solution is, that wasn't me on the TV show, okay? Obviously, they could not have known that if the if Z408 and Z340 were constructed at the same time. Okay, so in that sense, yes. I mean, there's no way that, although they anticipated making the phone call and setting up the Channel 7 show, they couldn't have known that somebody else would call in and impersonate the Zodiac, basically, and that he would mention the gas chamber. And both of those are in the plain text. Okay, so let's go to Dave Aranchek here, and we're going to go to episode 6. I strongly, if you're interested in the Zodiac case, and particularly if you're interested in the cryptography of the case, but in the case itself, okay, you need to watch Dave Aranchek's videos for two reasons. First of all, they're extremely well made. Okay, I'm proud of Dave for making those videos. They are right on the same level as the "This is the Zodiac Speaking" video that was put out in the David Fincher director's cut. Okay, so for that reason, they're worth watching. The second reason is that although multi-million people watched episode 5, what you want to watch in particular is episode 6 and episode 9, where he talks about how the Z340 was actually constructed, and some of the weird things that are in the undertext, if you will. You have what theater people call an undertext. You know, what's going on underneath the action. In cryptography, you have a ciphertext, you have a plain text, okay? But there's this third level that you might call the undertext of those top two levels, where essentially, in this case, the person constructing the cipher is talking to cryptographers who are trying to, or even successfully, deciphering the cipher. And I'm going to play part of 1969. If the TV episode 6. Let me see if I can. Okay, right about here. But I prefer the simple explanation that life is death is a separate statement at the end. One small fact about the 340's message is that Zodiac could not have written it before October 22nd, 1969. This is because his message refers to a TV show that aired that day. His first cipher, the 408, was solved about 2.5 months before that. Did he start working on the 340 during that time? Well, if he did, he didn't start with the message we discovered. He sent the 340 on November 8th, 1969. If the TV show inspired him to start making the 340, then he had about 2 weeks to make it. I wonder how long he was thinking about new ways to hide his message. Did he come up with those ideas during those 2 weeks? Or during the full 2.5 months after the 408 was solved? By the way, I also updated my Cipher Explorer. Okay, there's no way that cipher was constructed in 2 weeks, okay? Because even if whoever constructed the cipher, well, I mean, there's no way the cipher was started from scratch 2 weeks prior to the mailing. Because particularly if you look at episode 9 of Dave's video, you will note that there are all kinds of like weird things going on underneath the ciphertext. And for example, he mentions that there are 26 examples of rose-sized chunks in the cipher where no symbol repeats itself. In other words, you have 17 symbols, row-sized. Yeah, okay. Row-sized chunks. Each row is 17 symbols, and they don't always go from beginning to end. Sometimes they go from like the middle of one row down to the middle of the next row. But there are no repeating symbols. Okay, and I've already pointed out the backwards L's. You can see those. I think those are in episode 9 also. Okay, I don't see how somebody starting from scratch 2 weeks before the mailing could have done the transposition scheme, and included all the little details that are down in the trenches of the undertext in that short a time, and constructed the plain text message and everything else, and all of the little how do I want to call that, the little ins and outs of the cipher. What the reason I believe that the two ciphers, Z408 and Z340, were constructed at the same time is that Gareth Penn says that, and Gareth Penn, I believe he says it in Time 17. He may have just said it in a letter to me somewhere, but he said that the two main ciphers, Z408 and Z340, were constructed at the same time. Now, when he says they were constructed at the same time, what he means is the general grid for the cipher was constructed. Okay? So, for example, when the October 22nd Channel 7 show happens and Eric Weil calls in and claims to be the Zodiac and mentions the gas chamber, okay? Those were variations that whoever had time, with 2 weeks, UPenn had time to add those to, this line and this line over here, and just change the plain text, okay? Without changing the transposition scheme, and even with without changing like some of the things like not having certain symbols in the central part of the cipher grid, and so forth. In other words, you can keep everything pertaining to the format of the grid the way it was, and just move in, and just, look, printers have been doing that since the beginning, since Gutenberg, where they're putting a book together and say, oops, on page, 280 or something, there's a mistake or something, no problem. We will just change the galley for that page, and we'll move this around and change the text and move half a sentence up here or something like that. And it's still going to work. So that's the idea. As Dave points out there, and he's correct. If they started back at the he continues to believe that Z340 was a reaction to how quickly Z408 was solved. If you believe Gareth, and I have no reason to doubt him on that particular point, the two cipher grids were constructed right around the same time. In other words, Z340 was designed from day one to be a transposition cipher, and Z408 was designed to be a straight substitution cipher. And what people were going to get was the straight substitution cipher and then the transposition cipher. I don't think there's any way that the Zodiacs imagined that it would take 51 years between the solution of those two, okay? But it did. As Ryan Garlick was nice enough, there are two really great cryptographers that two guys that I like personally. Ryan, well, I like Dave. Dave's all right, but Dave has his quirks. But but Ryan Garlick and Klaus Schmey are great guys. Okay. But Ryan Garlick was talking to me one time we were talking about how quickly Z408 was solved, because we know that the FBI in Washington solved it independently of the Hardens. Okay. That's what it says in the police report. So I have to assume it's correct. Ryan told me, I said, well, what they probably did before they altered the cipher grid was they solved it. And then they decided to alter the grid so that they would be able to set up a key to catch somebody if somebody came forward with a solution. And it was based upon the original cipher grid. Then they could catch the person who actually sent the cipher. And Ryan told me, he said, "You're overestimating how quickly cryptographers can solve these things." And Ryan was right on the money about that. So, certainly about Z340. And when you consider that David Fincher has that joke in his movie where he says, here's NSA headquarters, here's FBI headquarters, here's CIA headquarters, where they're all trying to solve the cipher. And then he switches to, here's the breakfast nook of Donald and Betty Hardin. And he's just, he's really sticking it to the government agencies there. He's saying, you guys really don't know your business very well, do you? Well, the ciphers that the Zodiacs were sending were not similar to what outfits like the FBI usually deal with, as Dave has pointed out. So I don't want to be too hard on them. And I'm not a cryptographer, so any mistakes I just made in my explication of that, sue me. Okay, so that was the idea behind it's for Z340. It was just a matter of setting up the grid, and then you could plug in and unplug things if you needed to, and they did, apparently. Okay, let's see what else we got here. We have, go back to Ray Grant. Go back to, I think I dealt with everything as far as 8th, 2023. And, oh, I just got a message on my video. See, here's the thing. I may have solved the Zodiac case, but I'm not the greatest Zodiac killer researcher who ever lived. That guy lives in Oregon, and I think he lives in the Portland area, doesn't he? Anyway, he just sent me a message. It says, Tom Voigt. It says, Ray, this type of video is your true niche. I think I put out the worst videos in the entire Zodiac Killer world, but thanks, Tom. How's the message board doing? He's, as always, he's right. So I mean, I can't argue with that. But anyway, Tom's the greatest. I don't know if I mentioned that, but he is. And the number one researcher, and there's nobody in second. There's him. And how do we know that? We know that because everybody who purports to hate his guts, compulsively goes, anytime they need to know something, they go to his website. Okay, so that is the sincerest form of flattery, when you hate somebody's guts and you're using his output. Okay, so let's go to. All right, let me go here. It's like that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger where the Terminator ends up. And we have videos. I'm just going. I think I've answered everybody's questions so far. I'm going to. Sometime, and also the. Okay, somebody left a message for me on the Riverside video. And this person who calls himself Parents 2090 said, "Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I'm impressed with how much research you've done. Wouldn't your scenario open the murders up to a much bigger chance of being observed and captured?" So if I'm understanding what you've said, they specifically are after Bates and are following her. Not necessarily. Sherry Bates is may have been one of several people in that general area that they were considering as a possible victim. That's the whole idea behind the song. I've got a little list. They don't abduct her at her house when she is the only car in the driveway, but wait until she parks at a busy college library. No, none of the Zodiac victims were attacked that they're anywhere near their houses. And as I said in my reply, all of the crimes had something to do with the proximity of a vehicle. Okay. And I'm assuming that the reason for that is that the basis of the identification of the possible victims was done through the DMV, through the state database. And that's how UPenn was able to fixate on people whose names had certain properties. Okay. So in order to make a demonstration of that, they would then commit the crimes in the inside cars or around cars or in the general vicinity of cars. But the vehicle always had, a major, the vehicle was a major component of the crimes. Okay. And I think that, again, the reason for that was to make that point, which is I found out who these people are, and they became targeted through the DMV database, or through whatever it was, the state database. Okay. And also, as I pointed out to this guy or woman or whoever it was, what we see is an emphasis on the passenger side of each vehicle. Let's go back to it was the passenger door of the Faraday Rambler which was left open, okay? And the passenger side of the car was shot at. Even though they didn't exit the passenger side, they were brought to the crime scene after the Rambler was put there. And everything that happened to the Rambler happened after the victims were actually killed. In other words, the door was open, the engine was turned on, the heater was turned on, the front seat was reclined to 45 degrees or whatever it was. I think it was 45 degrees. And the two shots into the passenger side of the vehicle were also done after the two victims were dead. So, same thing at Blue Rock Springs Park. You might have thought that the assailant would approach the driver's side of the car, but he didn't. He approached the passenger side, and shot through the front passenger window. At Lake Berryessa, the message was written on the front passenger door, or on the passenger. I think it's just a two door, so it was on the passenger side door. At Presidio Heights, the killer got into the front seat from the passenger side. Of course, I don't know whether the inside of the vehicle was even accessible from the driver's seat, driver door, because the driver door had a big dent in it, and I don't know if you could actually open that door or not. I've never seen a photo of that cab with the driver door open. You would think that somebody would open the driver door if you could open it. Okay, so the emphasis, at least in the four public murders, and also with the Sherry Bates murder, where you had the car being disabled, again, I believe after she was murdered, but that's where the books were left. And her ignition key was left in the ignition and so forth, is that there was an emphasis on the vehicle, and in particular on the passenger side of the vehicle. And I believe that the reason for this was that the Zodiac Killers were emphasizing that although each of the victims was a driver, Sherry drove her car, David drove his car, Darlene drove, they were the two targeted victims. Darlene drove her car. Brian drove his Carmen Gia. Well, Cecilia was the actual, she died. Again, I don't think that was planned necessarily. The other thing about people have tried to debunk what I've said about Lake Berryessa by saying that what did they said that Brian came this close to having his his aorta cut or something like that. Yeah, attacking people with a knife is an inexact science. Okay, what is more amazing about the attack is that the killer made 17 thrusts into the two bodies, and none of them pierced the heart. Okay, now I think I don't have the autopsy in front of me. I think I think Cecilia's aorta was cut. She ended up dying because of loss of blood. Okay, but none of the thrusts were aimed at the heart, even though the two victims, especially Brian, was flat out, on his stomach, and his back was wide open. Okay, so don't you find that more convincing than the fact that he came pretty close to having a fatal wound? Okay, 17 thrusts, you would think that there would be a fatal wound somewhere. I don't know how many movies I've seen over the years where like one thrust into the back and that's it. So, but again, I think knife attacks. If your intent was, let's see if I can avoid killing at least one of these victims, it's an inexact science. So, where did I leave off here? I'm going to have to start keeping notes, apparently. Much bigger chance to wait until. No, I was just saying. The Zodiacs appeared to have been making the point that though the victims were driving their cars to whatever locations, they were actually passengers. Okay, does that make sense? In other words, the victims were being moved around by the Zodiacs. Okay, it may appear as if the victims were driving to, and just unfortunately, by bad happenstance, they ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But that's not true. I believe what the Zodiac Killers were trying to emphasize is that the victims were actually passengers and were being driven to their deaths, in effect, by the Zodiacs. And the way they did that was to emphasize the passenger side of the car. Okay? So let's go back to, if possible, Monday, they specifically were after Bates. They don't abduct her at a house, wait till she parks at a busy college library. As well, we don't know that. I point out in my novel that when she drives back to RCC after going back to her house to get her bibliography, she is being followed by a car. At least that's what the March Air Force man says. And what may have happened is, what I have happened in my novel is, she pulls over in an attempt to get them to go around her. And then they just pull up behind her, get out, and in my novel, they talk her into, Penn talks her into going with him because he has state ID. And And that's a possibility. He could, in my novel, U Penn comes up. He has state ID, and he says that they want to ask her questions about her dad. Her dad worked in the defense industry. I mean, it's conceivable that they walked up to Sherry Bates and acted like they were investigators and they wanted to talk to her about, like I said, about her dad who worked for the defense industry, and they were checking out some leaks at his plant or something like that. One of the things that happens in the Zodiac Killer case is the Kathleen Johns kidnapping, where Kathleen Johns is abducted without realizing that she is being abducted. And one of the points that they were making, that was a demonstration by the Zodiac Killers, and one of the points that they were making it is surprisingly easy to abduct somebody without their knowing, and Ted Bundy did it. Okay, it's surprisingly easy to abduct somebody without their realizing it, and by the time they realize it, they can't do anything about it. In the case of Ted Bundy's abduction of Kathleen Parks, I believe, he said. He said that he was driving someplace on a pretext. He had to go and get something, and he was driving out towards the woods. And as he's doing that, she's getting more and more uncomfortable, obviously, but she wants to go on believing that he's legit, basically. By the time she actually decides to do something about it, it's too late. So unfortunately, it appears that happens to victims all the time, particularly in cases where the victim may know her abductor. So anyway, busy kind of soon as she exited without being seen, risking a couple now. So I mean, or she could have been abducted at gunpoint. Okay, but what I'm saying is, the Zodiac Killers were not necessarily locked into Sherry Bates being a victim. Okay, I just saw a video about the Allies, the Americans bombing Hiroshima and then bombing Nagasaki. And I never realized this before, but Nagasaki wasn't the first targeted city. I believe the city they intended to bomb was Kokura. But when they got to Kokura, there was like a cloud cover, and they couldn't locate the place where they needed to drop the atomic bomb. So they went on to Nagasaki, and they ran into actually worse conditions than Nagasaki. And just as they were about to give up, the clouds cleared and they could see down into Nagasaki, and they were able to drop the bomb. Okay. So where an atomic bomb was dropped came down to availability of which city was available. Okay. In the case of Sherry Bates, my guess is that they were following her, hoping to abduct her, and she just happened to put herself in a situation where they could approach her and either, talk her into going with them or putting her under, or taking her at gunpoint. Okay. But it didn't, just because there's a possibility that somebody might the whole issue of secondary crime scenes is a major topic when law enforcement officers go to colleges and talk to women in colleges. One of the things they point out, they say, if you think that you're about to be abducted or someone wants to rape you, the last thing you want to happen is to be taken to a secondary crime scene. Okay? In other words, do everything in your power to remain wherever you are in the general flow of whatever, pedestrian traffic, and hope that someone may end up coming out or coming by, or somebody driving by or something like that. Because if you allow yourself to be taken to a secondary crime scene, the least that's going to happen to you is that you're going to be raped. Okay, so that's the whole idea. But it comes down to whether or not the Zodiacs were able to take Sherry Bates to a secondary crime scene. Apparently, they were, because she ended up dead. Um, let's see if she had a. Okay, they just ask. I've explained about how the library checking out the books and so forth were done. Um, they put Bates back and drive back to the library, risking. Nobody was at the library at 10:30 that night. Okay, once the library closed, the whole area pretty much cleared out by 9:30 or so. I believe the woman who is often quoted as going through the alley where the body was found and seeing a guy smoking. Okay, well, those were a couple of stragglers. Okay, but the general area was deserted by the time Sherry Bates was murdered. Um, okay, I think I've given that guy enough time. Let's go. I will go to the other. Guess or wondered why anybody. Lake Herman Road. Okay, your version of events. Let me see. Again, the motive for taking the victims where they were taken was to place the victims on the landscape. Okay, as I pointed out, Sherry Bates was intended to be murdered by the Zodiacs, to be murdered at 117 degrees 23 minutes, 33 longitude, 33 degrees 58 minutes latitude. Okay, so that's where they were taking her. The idea was to take her to a place which otherwise, if they took her there earlier, they would have been seen. By killing her around 10:30, the area was deserted. Same thing with the victims at Lake Herman Road. And again, there is some evidence which has been pointed out by a detective from the Chicago Police Department that they were actually trying to kill their victims right around the time when shift changes were occurring at the local police department. So, yeah, I don't. I'm not going to go on about the ballistics of the Lake Herman Road of the gate number 10 turnout, because I think I've covered that issue ad nauseum. Let me see if I've got. Okay, about 1:15. I don't want to. I want to get to the general idea behind the the video here. Okay, I'm going to talk about the overall strategy of the letters, and maybe I'll do this vertically. I haven't tried that yet. Maybe I'll do it vertically. Okay. What we have, is that the blue? Or is it? Okay, this is the black. Okay. Okay. Let me see if this is how visible this is. I guess that's. Let me move back here. Okay, you can see that. Okay. So, all right. These are the Zodiac Killer letters. Okay. Okay, I don't know what I did with the top of this. And oh, here it is. Okay. These are the first 5 letters sent by the Zodiac Killers. Okay. What we have here is the confession letter copy to Riverside PD, whatever it was. It may have been the first. I'm going to treat these as though they're the same, but I don't know which I should put one in number and which at 2. The confession letter to Riverside PD. The confession letter to the Riverside Enterprise. Okay? Those are letters 1 and 2. Letters 3, 4, and 5 are the loose leaf letters. I've already explained why the 2016 hoax letter writer was not the author of the 3 loose leaf letters. There are 2 reasons for that. The loose leaf letters do not in any way resemble the initial mailing made by the killer. That's number 1. Number 2, the 2 of the 3 letters appear to be signed with a Z. Okay, it would seem like a tremendous coincidence if some anonymous teenager sending a hoax letter through some supernatural process realized that this murder would eventually be associated with the Zodiac Killer, with someone whose name began with a Z. The third reason to believe it wasn't sent by a hoaxer is that all 3 letters were double posted. And as I've said, having worked for the U.S. Postal Service for 37 years, for every letter that I ever saw in my career that had more postage than it needed to have, I saw thousands and thousands and thousands of letters that didn't have enough postage. People generally do not overpost their letters, and all 3 letters were double posted exactly the way the Bay Area letters were double posted. Okay, so there we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the first 5 letters. So um, 6, 7, 8 or Z408 to Vallejo Times-Herald, San Francisco Examiner, San Francisco Chronicle. Okay? Those are the first 8 letters. The 5 in Riverside and the 3 portions of Z408. The 9th letter was this is the Zodiac speaking debut. Zodiac, we'll call it Zodiac. And that was sent to the San Francisco Examiner in August of 1969. No one will ever know exactly when that was mailed because we don't have the envelope. The envelope was lost. Okay, so that's the 9th letter. The 10th letter is the October 13th letter that contained a swatch of Paul Stein's shirt. So I will call it the October 13th letter. And these are all to the San Francisco Chronicle. Put PS there. The 11th letter was the pen card. And that was 11/8/69. The 12th letter was what do we call the 12th letter? Do we call it the bus bomb letter? I think so. We'll call it bus bomb. And that came 11/9/69. The 13th letter was Dear Melvin. And that was 12/20/69. Okay? Do you follow me so far? Those are the Zodiac letters, okay? Richard Grinnell is going to be very upset by this video, by the way. So, but what can you do? Okay, I'm going to have to continue down here because I wanted to make a second column. I don't see how I'm going to be able to do that, so I will just continue down here. The 14th letter is April 20th, 1970, and that was the Z13 letter. The 15th letter is the dragon card, and that was 4/28/70. The 16th letter is the Mount Diablo card. And that's 6/26/70. And that has Z32 in it. The 17th letter is the it's the one that says it's kidnapping confirmation letter. It's Kathleen Johns. And that was 7/24/70. Okay. The 18th letter is the Mikado letter. I've got a little list. And that was 7/26/70. The 19th letter is the 19th letter is the hole card. The card that contained punched holes. It contained a quote from the Smidgens cartoon, and that was 10/5/70. The 20th letter is the Halloween card. And that was 10/27/70. The 21st letter was the LA Times letter. And that was March 13th/71. And the 22nd letter was the Sierra Club card. And that was March 22nd/71. Okay? So that's what we've got. We have, let's draw a line here. Remember, the desk poem was not a letter. Okay? So these are the letters. The First 5 are Riverside. And from 6 through 22 were sent in the Bay Area, and they were, oops, sorry about that. '17, '18, Mikado, 19. I keep smudging these here. Okay. From 6 through 22 were the letters sent in the Bay Area proper period as the Zodiac. Remember, everything after this was synonymous. Okay. And the question is, how many letters were sent here? The answer to that is, there were 5 letters here. And not surprisingly, there were 17 letters in the Bay Area from 6 through 22 in the Zodiac proper series, okay? Then in the pseudonymous series, 23 was The Exorcist. That's 129.74. 24 was the SLA letter. That was, I believe, 214.74. 25 was the Badlands letter. That was 58.74. And 26 was the Count Marco letter, which was 79.74. Okay? And that is 4 letters. So what we have I keep smudging it. You can't try this again. What we have here is we have in Riverside we have 5 letters. In the Bay Area we have 17 letters that were sent by the Zodiac Killers. And in the pseudonymous letters of 1974, we have 4 more letters. The Exorcist letter, the SLA letter, the Badlands letter, and the Count Marco letter. And these add up to 26. How many letters did the Zodiac Killers send in their entire project? They sent 26. Why did they send 26? How many letters are in the alphabet? 26. That's correct. When I point to things like pi converting to zodiac, what are we talking about? We're talking about alphabet numbers. When I talk about the gun numbers, it's actually a reverse alphabet that then converts to alphabet numbers. Okay? And that gets you the alphabet numbers get you from pi to an anagram for zodiac, CADOIZ, okay? So essentially, it's another example of them pointing to you. Tom Voigt, I just mentioned him, pointed out that the 2 of the communications in Riverside, the bottom of the loose leaf letters, 2 of the 3 loose leaf letters say Z. The bottom of the I've done this before, but I'll do it again. The bottom of the loose leaf letters say Z. The bottom of the desk poem says RH. Okay? That would lead us to assume that Z equals RH, correct? And it does by alphabet numbers. The 26th letter, which is Z, equals R, the 18th letter, plus H, the 8th letter. Okay? So the point to be made is before they did anything, before they killed anybody, the Zodiac Killers intended to send 26 letters. Because sending 26 letters underscored that they were using the alphabet, and they were using letters applied to numbers according to the way they are in the alphabet. Okay, so again, sorry to disappoint Richard Grinnell, but you can chuck all of the, if I may paraphrase Richard Grinnell, you can chuck all those letters that you think are Zodiac letters. They aren't. These are the Zodiac letters right here. The ones I pointed out. It's the 2 confession letters, the 3 loose leaf letters, the 3 cover letters, the 3 letters that included Z408, the debut of Zodiac letter, the San Francisco Examiner in August of '69, the October 13th letter, first Paul Stein letter, the pen card. Number 12 is the bus bomb letter, 11/9/69. 13 is the Dear Melvin letter. 14 is the April 20th letter, which included Z13. 15 is the Dragon card. 16 is the Mount Diablo letter, which included Z32. 17 is Kidnapping Confirmation letter, 7/24/70. 18th letter is the Mikado letter, 7/26. I've got a little list letter, 7/26/70. 19th letter, the whole card, 10/5/70. 20th letter is the Halloween card, 10/27/70. 21st letter is the LA Times letter. That was actually to the LA Times. March 13th, 71. 22nd is the Sierra Club card, which was March 22nd of 71. And those are all Bay Area Zodiac letters, 17 of them. He wrote in the Bay Area as the Zodiac Killer 17 times. Okay, and then the last 4 pseudonymous letters: the Exorcist letter, number 23, where he says me 37. Number 24, the SLA letter. 25, the Badlands letter, and 26, the final letter, the Count Marco letter. Okay, now. The great irony in all this, and the great irony in myself handing you this information, is that as some of us know, the Zodiac Killer actually wrote a 27th letter. Okay, this is kind of reminiscent of that movie that was made about Mark David Chapman, where I think it's called Chapter 27. Because there are 26 chapters in The Catcher in the Rye, and the idea of chapter 27 is it's about Mark David Chapman. Oops. The Zodiacs were never intended to write any more than 26 letters. The letters were supposed to come to an end after the 26th letter, and that was supposed to be it. And then the terminus event would happen, and the world would find out, well, we mailed 26 letters because there are 26 letters in the alphabet. Okay. By the way, doesn't that make sense? If everything that you're doing is part of a gigantic puzzle, wouldn't it make sense to have this, and you're sending letters, wouldn't it make sense to send 26 of them? Um, and to do that, to underscore the fact that you're using alphabet numbers in your coding system, okay? And it's the simplest. Is there a simpler coding system than alphabet numbers? I don't think so. I don't think they could have made it much simpler than they did, okay? But the 27th letter is the Eureka card, which was mailed in December of 1990. Why? It was mailed in December of 1990 because I sent my book to the JFK school in November of 1990. And Michael O'Hare was caught with his pants down. And for that matter, I hate to put it this way, but Berta Margulies was also caught. I'm a feminist, so I don't like to say this, but Berta was also caught with her pants down. And it's the first time that the Zodiacs were ever in a defensive position. Or at least since August the 11th, 1989, when Michael looked at the buildings, looked at the MIT Tower, looked at the lighting pattern in the MIT Tower and at the Liberty Mutual building, and came to the conclusion that he could not move on those places because they were ready for him, basically. But in December of 1990, the Zodiacs answered my mailing of my book to the JFK school. That was the response that I got. I got two responses. The first response was the Eureka card, which of course did not become public till the Fincher movie came out, and the San Francisco Chronicle went back over all the letters they had, and they suddenly realized, hey, we got this letter in December of 1990 that may have been from the Zodiac, and it actually was from the Zodiac. So that was actually the second thing that happened. The first thing that happened, it was after they were prevented from doing the Terminus event, they dug up Joan Webster's body and dumped it in Hamilton, Massachusetts, where it was found by a lady walking her dog. As I said, there's no way Joan Webster's body was there for 8.5 years. Or at least I don't see any. But if we're talking about the Zodiac Killer case, Zodiac hobbyists believe that Sherry Bates was inside the RCC library the night she was murdered. So they will believe anything, they will disbelieve anything, as long as it gets them to keep their sad little man. As long as they have that guy, running amok on the landscape, then you tell them what they have to believe, and they'll believe it. But anyway, let me see if I can. I don't want to leave without Eureka card Zodiac. Oh, okay. And now I will look at the images for the card. Okay. I told somebody, I think it may have been A.K. Wilkes, that I believe that the Eureka card was a receipt that was essentially sent to me, okay? But it was sent basically to acknowledge my mailing of the books to the JFK school. And again, I shouldn't make this accusation because I don't remember exactly who it was. It may have been A.K. Wilkes. It may have been somebody else. But whoever it was, they said, how dare you? How dare you think that, So, but anyway, the Eureka card looks like this, okay? What is the connection to Ray Grant in this card? Well, if you look at the 1971 movie, I think it was Hal Reed was the star, or is a guy named Reed, and in the movie he's a mailman, okay, and he is shown wearing Groucho glasses. He's shown wearing like what people call. Woody Allen has said that he never thought of this, the nose and the eyeglasses as Groucho, but I think most people think of them as Groucho glasses. Okay, in the movie, he disguises himself by wearing Groucho glasses, and he's a mailman. Okay, and the idea is, it's an example in the Zodiac Killer case of symmetry. In other words, a mailman sent a book to Michael O'Hare's place of employment. Okay, sent to his colleagues, and accused him of being being a serial killer, being the Zodiac Killer. Okay, so Michael O'Hare and the Zodiacs evoke this 1971 movie where a mailman turns out to be the Zodiac Killer. Okay, so does that make sense to you? It's kind of a direct receipt where he's mirroring what I'm doing to him, and so that's what the idea is. From your secret pal, he's got the little bunny here, and I think the bunny may represent. There weren't hobbyists back then, so maybe the public. Maybe they're saying, it doesn't matter what you say because the public's never going to figure this thing out, even if you explain it to them. And that has turned out to be true. This thing was sent back in 1990, but I think probably on some level, Mr. O'Hare realized that while I might be able to make some things uncomfortable for him, as I said, he is now, instead of taking his shits in Greater Boston, he's now taking them out in Berkeley. But other than that, I mean, his life hasn't changed that much. I suppose there was some financial unpleasantness involved with that, but what are you going to do? But anyway, that's the idea behind the Groucho thing. Okay, it's the idea that a mailman in the 71 movie wore Groucho glasses, and now he's getting back at a mailman who sent books to the JFK school, and it's a reciprocal type of mailing. And inside the card, he includes a Xerox of USPS mailbox. Okay, and what you have to remember is that my book, which was called The Zodiac Murders Solved, the address for the publishing house, which I called Bookham Books, was a post office box. And I'm not going to give the number here because I've since given up that box, and it's been taken by somebody else, by other people. But the idea was that my publishing house, I work for U.S. Postal Service. My publishing house was a post office box. That was the address. So inside the card, he puts a Xerox that has 2 keys to a post office box. Now, what the connection to, Mr. Klingel, or whether he happened to see, 2 post office box keys somewhere and took a picture, some grabbed them, put them remember, every postal lobby I've ever been in that was in a city. I don't remember if I was ever in any rural post offices. Offhand, I don't remember being in one. But all of the normal city post offices had Xerox machines in the lobby. I can't remember ever seeing a postal building that I worked in that didn't have one. Okay, so it would have been not that hard, I would think, if somebody left his post office, let's say somebody walked in, opened up his post office box, was distracted by whatever he took out of there. Maybe he got a slip for a package or something, and left the box open, walked over to the counter to get his package. Meanwhile, Michael O'Hare or Gareth Penn or whoever just takes the post office key, puts them on a Xerox, makes a copy. And it would not have been that difficult to do. And if you hung around a lobby somewhere, you would probably see, if that was what your intent was, you could probably pull that off without too much surveillance. And usually there was like some sort of swing, glass door in between where the post office boxes are, where people would access their post office box, and where the counter area was. So it would not have been difficult to pull off. Just as I said, what I'm trying to suggest here is it's possible that Mr. Klingel was just happened to be his keys just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were used by somebody to make a Xerox copy. If any of this stuff ever comes to light, it'll be interesting to hear what the story behind that was. But the idea behind this, the Eureka card, Eureka is what Archimedes said, okay, when he figured out how he could measure the volume of liquids by how much is displaced. He got into a tub of water or something like that, and he realized that he could figure out what the volume of an irregular sized object by just seeing how much water was displaced by that. And he supposedly ran naked through the streets yelling Eureka, which means I have found it. Okay. And so this was the Zodiac's response to my sending the book, essentially saying, okay, you figured out the puzzle. And they didn't expect to be in that situation. As I said, upstairs I'm going to check the, it's about 1:45. Upstairs I have a copy of Michael O'Hare's 50th Harvard class report, where he says, and I don't have the book in front of me. I don't want to go upstairs and get it because my videos are enough of a joke now. I don't want to walk away and then come back like 2 minutes later. But anyway, what Michael O'Hare says in his 50th class reunion is, or class report is, he said, I thought I knew what I was going to do for a living when I was 17, semicolon, okay? I was mistaken, okay? That seems like an odd thing to say to me. I think the Zodiacs were not expected the Terminus event to happen. It didn't happen. As I said, they were a little bit like the Schwarzenegger character in the Terminator sequel, after, and in that case where he actually does kill John Connor, but then he's not programmed for whatever comes afterward. In these Zodiacs had not planned for a future where the Terminus event didn't happen. Okay, so their first response was to after I sent the book, to send the Eureka card, and that's the response. That was the 27th letter of the Zodiac Project, and it was acknowledging the fact that I was lucky enough to get Liberty Mutual and MIT to cooperate with me, and we were, and not just me obviously, but but Liberty Mutual and MIT um, stopped stopped the Terminus event from happening, and then everything that happened after that wasn't planned for. I mentioned I mentioned John Mark David Chapman earlier. John Lennon once said that life is what happens while you are making other plans. Okay, so they planned this very elaborate project, and it didn't quite come off the way they thought it was going to. So that's what happened with the Eureka card. But again, the general intent of the letters was to send 26 letters, and possibly in my next video, I may go down through the letters and point out like interesting aspects of each letter. In my last video, I was considering calling this video. I was considering calling it More Ned DeHaan, because I got more views like in less than a day for that video than I've gotten for any of my videos that are actually about the Zodiac project. So I don't know. I think that basically tells you all you need to know about the Zodiac Killer online community. The fact that I got more views for a video that's about the interaction of Zodiac researchers and hobbyists than I did about with detailed discussions of the case itself. So anyway. So I considered calling this video More Ned DeHaan, but I'm not interested in clickbait. I'm interested in convincing people what I'm talking about. So like I said, in my next video, I may talk about I may go down through the letters and talk about like specific aspects of specific letters and what was being brought across. But the important thing to remember is that, as with the as what I talked about Z340, I said the format is more important than the content. The format of the cipher, 20 rows by 17 columns, is more significant than the actual plain text of the that you would find under the ciphertext. And in a way, the overall form of the letter writing is more significant than what was actually in the letters. Although I think there are some significant things in the letters themselves, but the point to be made from the format of the letters is that one of the main clues to be had from the letters is just in the format of the letters themselves. It was 26 letters, and as I said, that's how we know that the hoax letters that Richard Grinnell talks about aren't actually from the Zodiac Killer, because the intent was to send 26 letters. And I can remember talking to Gareth Penn back in the 1980s, and we were talking about the 1978 letter. And Gareth was irate about that letter, and he said, "That's a letter that was sent by Dave Toschi." Okay. And of course, Gareth would have some expertise on that point. Okay. But I thought it was a little bit, I can't say that that's what made me suspect Gareth, but I thought he was awfully emotional and indignant even about the idea that Dave Toschi had sent this hoax letter, the 78 Zodiac, which was not a Zodiac letter. Because again, like Eric Weil calling into the Channel 7 show, it spoiled the effect that the Zodiacs were trying to create. Okay, so it's the same idea here. Let me see if I. Yeah, I think that's. I can talk about the some of the details of this maybe in my next video, or maybe I'll go back to talk if there's a sudden dip in the number of views I get for this video. I may go back to talking about Ned in my next video. We'll see. I don't. There wouldn't be any point. I appreciate Tom commenting on my video, that I just talked about, but I haven't looked at Tom's board in at least a month. I think maybe a month. I have no idea what's going on over there, and I have no intention. I go to Tom's website all the time. I have no intention of ever clicking on that board again. I would say the same thing about Ned's video channel. I'm not going over there. I mean, I'm sure some of those people will end up coming over to. I've gotten a couple of questionable posts that I've had to remove from my own channel in the last in the last day or so. But I really don't have any interest in what's going on, and most of it really doesn't pertain to what I'm interested in anyway, because virtually everything that I talk about in the Zodiac case is from what you might call the Penn O'Hare angle. And so even if Ned had like a Zodiac killer researcher, I wouldn't, Mike Gradelli, nice guy. I don't have any particular reason to listen to his video, or I don't have a general. Odd as this may sound, I don't have a general interest in the case. I am almost 2 hours. I am 100% positive of my interpretation of the Zodiac Killer case, so I can say this, I guess. I don't have any real interest at all in any of the other interpretations of it, because I know they're wrong. Okay. Now, again, if that makes me arrogant, then I'm arrogant. I think I'm just confident in my own analysis of the case, and I'm sorry if some people are offended by that. But anyway, one of the advantages of not being interested in that stuff is that I have no particular reason to go over to Ned's channel, and so I'm not going to, whatever's been said over there, or whatever will be said on the next Zodiac Monday, I won't know about it, and I would much rather concentrate on what I'm doing over here, and so I hope that sounds reasonable. Like I said, I'm going to come off as the bad guy no matter what I do. People are going to end up, let me see here, almost 2 hours. People are going to end up saying that I'm the bad guy anyway, so it almost doesn't matter what I do. One of the things that is instructive, I think, about the Zodiac Killer case is that it's an example of what happens when people have a kind of ingrained belief in one thing or another. It's very difficult to get them away from that belief. And I realize that what I'm talking about is, September 11th was a unique situation. My hope is we never see anything like that again. As one of the analysts said, just in a day or two after the event, he pointed out, he said, this is never going to happen again, because uh, people on an airplane are never going to tolerate uh, having the plane taken over and hijackers going into the cockpit and so forth. They will fight, to the death to prevent that from happening, and that's what happened with Flight 93. Okay, that day. Okay, so the Zodiac Killer case. If I were saying that every serial murder case um, was a matter of conspirators working together, I think people might be justified in saying I was crazy. I'm not saying that. I believe I eventually intend to do some JFK videos on this channel. I am in the Lee Harvey Oswald camp. I think Oswald acted alone. Okay. At least 60% of the American public thinks that there was some, even if Oswald was involved, that it was all part of a plot. Okay, so uh, uh, like I said, I'm generally very skeptical about things like that. Ned and I were talking about UFOs during one of his streaming events. I found the information about the two Navy pilots to be very interesting, and it sounds like a very credible experience. Although I suspect that there was some other, there was it might have been like a case of a drone that wasn't recognized as a drone, or some kind of unusual, like stealth drone or something that the two pilots saw. But and the interesting thing about that particular instance is that when they came back to their ship, most of the people disbelieved what they were saying. They were not coming back to a situation where most of the people would find what they were saying to be to be credible. The opposite was true. They were coming back to a group of people who were science based and very skeptical. Okay, and they still maintained what they saw. So I mean, but generally speaking, I am skeptical, and I would probably, if somebody came to me with this theory of mine, I would certainly initially be skeptical, and I was skeptical when I was skeptical. I was somewhat skeptical when I heard it from Gareth. All of the information that Gareth gave me, I went and I confirmed it independently, to the extent I went down to the Carnegie Library here in Pittsburgh, the main branch, and looked up the progressive architecture issue and so forth. So, I mean, I was skeptical up to a point, but also what he was saying made perfect sense to me. So, anyway, I may talk about some of that next time. I will probably talk about some of the individual letters. I'm not absolutely sure what I'm going to do, and it all depends on whether my voice holds up or not. So, anyway, I would like to thank everybody. This has been a very rambling video, even for me. So I would like to thank everybody for watching, and if you've stayed to the end, thanks very much. And I will see you again soon.